Joe Mulherin, Mulherin. I worked at Stax in 1970, and Luther was my friend. So anyway, I was in the publicity department, writing artist bios and press releases, and that was the year I was there. It was earlier than 11 Years Wrong. This was like Ain't That 11 You was the record we were working that year, which is really Luther's first real chart record, and good record. A lot of people cut that, but Luther was just, it was 1970. It was the wild and woolly days of Stax,
Right.
But there were a few guys that were just real gentlemen. Some of the older guys like William Bell or Will Milton were just very, real put together, gentlemanly guys. And Luther was like, to me, was the younger gentleman. Luther was only, I think, 3 years older than I was. And we both were from Jackson, Tennessee, actually. Was what made us laugh the first time we talked. But it's not besides us and Carl Perkins, that was about it for Jackson, I think. But,
Three big ones, though.
but Luther, it was the 70s. And it was really the tail end of the 60s, early 1970. And Luther was just such a sweet-hearted person, I think you'd be very hard put to find someone that had something nasty to say or uncomplimentary to say about Luther. He was just so smooth, and he loved to sing, and he loved people. And that was what was so odd in a way, because here's Luther, who's like just such a sweetheart and a young gentleman who had one of the most gangster-ass managers in the history of the R&B business,
Yeah.
Johnny Baylor. In fact, I only feel free to talk about Johnny because he did.
Yeah.
Somebody took him out. but no, Luther was, in fact, there's several things I love about Luther. But I think the clearest memory is I had the corner office way down at the end of the hall at Stax, and when he was in the building, if he'd been out on the road, Luther would just walk in and see me, smile that sweet smile of his, and hold out his hand, and I'd hold out my hand, and he would put into it one very well rolled joint of the best dope he'd run into since the last time he'd seen me. And it was he had very good taste, but it was just his little, how you doing, and we were close together in age, and neither one of us were as crazy as some of the folks around there, so we just kind of like to hang, or go to the little sundry store across the College Street there and have get some lunch, or but it was, you could really tell, I could really tell just from what he was cutting, Ain't That 11 You is a great record.
Right.
It was a top 10 R&B.
Oh, yeah.
And almost we couldn't quite get it over the hump on the top 40 of pop, but it was really close. But man, he just sang the hell out of that, and
Nobody
you
else
could
did it
tell.
like that.
Oh no, everybody and his brother cut the thing. Well, John, I think they wrote it for Johnny Taylor. I think Johnny cut it first.
Right.
And technically, Luther's was a cover, but nobody remembers Johnny's record.
Right. Nobody remembers that.
May he rest in peace. He was a great
guy.
guy.
Isaac tried to do it. Isaac didn't do it.
But Isaac did it. Well, actually, it's the only record I think that was ever put out as Isaac Hayes and David Porter.
Right.
And then David put out one album as a solo album that really didn't do much. But yeah, boy, I still miss Isaac though. He was my pal. But the thing about Luther in those days is you could see him coming. He was like, probably when I knew Luther was probably 25, I guess. And but there was something about him that you could see him coming. If you listen to, I listened to some of those older records on weird labels you never heard of before or after that. Some of those early things he
Like Decca.
he recorded in the city. Well, actually, these were some
Earlier
little
than that.
indie labels that were like, I'd never heard of them. But
Right.
But then the one thing Johnny Baylor did for him, I must say, is after he signed to Coco and they got hooked up with Stax, is when the momentum really got going because they really got access to that East Memphis publishing catalog material. You know, that Homer and Raymond and those guys were writing.
When you talk about the momentum,
Yeah.
explain the momentum.
Well, the thing is, it's funny. So much of momentum. Part of it is, you know, can you get the record on it? Well, back then, it's so totally different now. Back then, it was, can you get the record on the radio? You know, can you get some coverage in Jet, you know, or Ebony?
Yeah.
Can you?
Urban Magazine.
Are the distributors people, are they going to work it? You know, are they going to go out there and work it? And so on the business side, that's the momentum. But for an artist also, I think, you know, as sometimes, I don't know, I never saw what his dynamic was with Johnny, so I don't know what that was like, you know. But I mean, Luther was a smart guy, and he knew, you know, so much of momentum as an artist, I think, is morale. You know, if you're out there, you know, beating your head against the wall with mediocre songs on labels that don't know what to do with them, you feel like you're not, you know, and you're in quicksand, and you feel like you're getting pulled down by that, you know. But you go to a place like Stax in those days was, you know, early when Luther came on. It was early in like the second phase of Stax, in the post-Atlantic phase of Stax.
Right.
And man, it was cranking. I mean, people were coming into work every day writing songs.
The first phase was Otis Redding.
First phase was, you know, when they were distributed by Atlantic.
Atlantic, yeah.
And it was, you know, Sam and Dave,
That's where they got Sam
Eddie
and Dave
Floyd.
from, on loan, Sam and Dave. They didn't know they had Sam and Dave on loan.
Well, no, they knew that they were an Atlantic act.
Yeah.
And that Jerry sent them down there because the people in New York didn't know what to do with them.
Right.
And Isaac and David knew exactly what to do with them. Writing some great songs, and you know, Sam came in town and played a big benefit for me back last fall, just before he turned 78 and still singing his ass off.
Yeah. 78
years old. Eddie Floyd just turned 77. It's out there. I bet you he'll do 100 shows this year.
I saw him last year. Yeah.
But then the thing about Luther was that he had I think it made a big difference to him that he could feel that momentum. I mean, that was his first record that really charted, you know, and that people really heard on the radio.
Right.
And they really, he was going, damn, I'm a recording artist, you know. And he was getting that feeling, I think. And it all he needed was exactly the right song to go that last lap. And 2 years later, you know, Homer and Raymond and I forget who else. I think there were 3 writers on that, as I recall, but I know it was Homer Banks and Raymond Jackson and somebody else, maybe Carl. Carl, yeah. But they wrote that song, man, and that was it. You know, I mean, it was a great song.
I heard that the song sat on a shelf for a while, The Emotions.
Yeah.
But,
well, you know, over there, I mean, people were writing, Raymond and
certain songs were for certain groups.
And Homer were in they were in a writing group with Betty Crutcher that was called We Three, is what they called it.
Okay.
Like they wrote a lot of Johnny Taylor stuff. They wrote Who's Making Love, such a great song, a great record. But you know, there were different people that were signed to East Memphis, which is the publishing company, that they would just hook up in the studio or in one of the writing offices and just like, let's write. I got this idea. What you got for this? You know.
Right.
And it was just that kind of momentum. And people were cutting in both studios. There was an A studio and a B studio. And people were just going in there and cutting tracks. Like I remember one time there was this guy named Freddie Briggs. This interview's not about me, but I mean, this shows you what the feeling was like over there. I was sitting in my office, like writing a press release or something one day, and there was this young guy named Freddie Briggs who was like really wanted to be a producer really bad, and he had saved up some money and he cut this really great track. And he only had like one verse of lyrics in it, but he cut it in a real funny key because he didn't know who he was cutting it for.
Right.
He thought maybe he was cutting it for Isaac, or who's, you know, got a voice like mine, got a low voice. But you know, it wasn't what Isaac was into.
Right.
You know, and he couldn't find anybody to sing it, so Freddie was going up and down the halls going, "You sing?" And I said, "Yeah, I sing a little." He said, "Well, come here and come in here." I mean, he drugged me into Studio A. said, "Put the cans on," and it was like it was just a little too high for me, you know.
Right.
But it was that kind of feeling that, you know, I think Isaac's success really rekindled that we can kick ass feeling around Stax, you know, because they had such a shock when the Atlantic deal came to an end. They suddenly realized that Atlantic had the rights to all those masters because Jim had signed a bad contract.
Yeah.
You know, so they had no catalog. Their catalog was gone. And so Al Bell, being the crazy guy that he is, man, Al said, "You know what we're gonna do?" I forget how many he was. He said, "We're gonna cut 35 albums and release them all in 2 weeks," or something like that.
Right.
I forget what the exact numbers were, but they did it.
They did, yeah.
And the whole industry went, "Damn," you know. And then of course Hot Buttered Soul was like,
yeah.
you know, I mean that was a paradigm shifting record. You know, people say Shaft, but it was really Hot Buttered Soul that was just. And you know, Alan and Jim, I think they were privately wondering, what the hell is Isaac doing? You know, he's getting all these standards, like The Look of Love and like all these things. Didn't write any of the songs. By the time I get to Phoenix, you know. But he was Isaac, and they trusted him.
Right.
And Isaac was just ahead of the culture, you know. He was ahead of the culture, and there it was. But it was on another story. I told you on the phone too that the last time I didn't see Luther in the last years of his life. You know, we kind of lost track of each other because I left Stax and went to Europe and was doing stuff, and Luther kept on and did Loving You Was Wrong, and then the craziness happened with Johnny and all that. But I knew I had tried to reach out to him actually when we were doing a concert called Soul Comes Home, which is a big reunion concert for all the Stax folks who were still alive and some guest artists. I'm thinking it was 2003, I believe. We did it at the Orpheum Theater downtown in Memphis. It was a PBS Play special.
Okay.
And Luther's health wasn't really good enough to come and sing, you know.
Right.
But I wanted something of him on there. I wanted somebody to sing "Live Loving You Is Wrong," and the only person I could possibly think of that could do it, and it wouldn't be like a lame cover, you know, was Luther Vandross, who had already agreed to be on the show, to come down because he was a big Stax fan, you know.
Right.
And I remember I talked to Luther. I finally got hold of him. His road manager gave him my number, and he called me up one night, kind of late, I don't know, like 9, 10 at night, and we were talking, you know, and I said, "Man, Luther," I said, "I think you've got to do If Loving You Is Wrong." And he went, "Oh, man, that's one of my favorite songs in the world, but I could never sing that as good as Luther. I don't think I would feel right doing that." And
Luther Vandross said that.
That's what Luther Vandross said.
Wow.
You know, and I said, "Well, Luther, I really think if anybody can come up to Luther Ingram's level, it's you. And so I'm begging you, think about it. Go back, listen to the record. You got the record?" He said, "I got the record right here." Yeah. And so he said, go back and listen to the record and let's talk tomorrow." And I had just about got him talked into it. He just didn't want him. He was a very not an egoistic person, you know. And the next day I got a call from his road manager, and late that night after I talked to him, Luther had his stroke.
Luther Vandross had his stroke.
Luther Vandross had his stroke.
Wow.
And so nobody sang that song on the concert because who else? Who you gonna get to do it? You know?
Right.
But to me, I'm so glad that y'all are doing this film because I just think, you know, that Luther's voice and his spirit, as carried by his voice, was really important to a lot of people, a lot of artists and fans. But a lot of artists were really like Luther Vandross was. I mean, they were just like, "Oh man,
right,
Luther Ingram." And I think it's really important for folks now to understand what a rare talent he was, and and I just like those of us that knew him love remembering what a sweet guy he was,
Right.
and the music business in any era is not overpopulated with really sweethearted people, and that's why he always has stood out in my mind. And I wish I could go hear him play tonight.
I wish I could too. But some of those Johnny Baylor issues, some of the Johnny Baylor stories.
Oh yeah, well Johnny, I didn't personally witness a lot of Johnny stuff, but Johnny was a gangster, and he had the coldest eyes. I mean, Johnny wore sunglasses a lot, but man, when he took those sunglasses off, it was like the eyes of a boa constrictor. It was like you just knew you didn't want to mess with this guy,
Right.
And he had an enforcer person that worked with him named Dino, who may he rest in peace. I think he passed away last year.
Right.
Who, interestingly,
This year.
Was it this year?
Yeah, this year.
But who ended up as a minister, interestingly enough, for.
That's unusual.
Yes, he was. Well,
somebody
Dino was a funny guy because he was like a split personality guy. If you decided Dino would come see me in my office, and he was like a very stocky build. He was like a short WWE wrestler, and he shaved his head like Isaac because he thought it was real cool, Because Isaac was really the first guy after Kojak that shaved his head. And
right.
And Dino was just, he was really muscular. He was like a short middle linebacker sort of is how he came across. But he was just, he was like, hey, how you doing, man? Kind of goofy, kind of fun. But man, when Johnny Baylor turned that other switch, no. And I think Dino went to see some folks that really didn't know if they wanted to play Luther's records, and after Johnny's visits, they really wanted to play Luther's records.
That's what we heard. Right.
And I think maybe his move into the church there might have been a little
Forgiveness he needed.
He might have been,
repentant.
Well, it's like it reminds me of the old saying, physician heal thyself.
Right.
It's like, but I think I never saw him during those days, but I understand that he had, that the sweet side of his personality was still there, and it's just that the other may have died with Johnny.
Right.
Which would have been a good thing because he was like a split personality. But Johnny was, I was glad that he got Luther heard and got him a deserved. There was nothing undeserved about that number one for Loving You Is Wrong. That was one of the great records of the 1970s or any decade, I think.
Right.
The production was so wonderful, and Luther just sang his heart out, and it was a great song. And it's one of the, you can always tell a great song when it can be cut in any style,
Right.
Luther had a big R&B hit on it. Barbara Mandrell had a giant country hit on it.
Yeah.
It's been cut as a pop song. It's
Rod
been cut
Stewart.
Yeah.
I remember Rod Stewart calling the house when he said he wanted to cut it.
Yeah.
He called the house. I answered the phone.
Yeah, well, that was, that had to be validation for Luther, I think, because he wanted to cut it because he loved the way Luther sang it. Not the way Barbara Mandrell sang it.
Barbara did it for her folks, for her.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Her crowd,
But it was,
worked for her,
it's a great song. Those guys were good songwriters. And they
She was very graceful, though. She did it at Six Flags, the amusement park, and I remember when she came, she made sure we got there. We came there in a limousine, and she brought my dad up on stage and said, "I'm about to do this song, and this is the man who originally sung this song, and I hope I can do a pretty good job, you know. And he was up there with her, and it was crazy. You know, the kid.
Yeah, I've met her a couple of times. She's a very sweet lady. But you know, I mean, Johnny was one of the kind of guy I was going to go have dinner with, you know. But I appreciated the fact that because of Johnny, Luther didn't continue to labor in obscurity with all these obscure little labels where people didn't understand his talent and what to do with it, you know. And that he brought him to Stax and got him access to those really good songs and really good producers and great studio musicians that could really give him the setting he needed for his diamond, you know.
Right.
And so as long as people love soul music, they'll be loving Luther Ingram.